it doesn't matter. And I don't know how we get to the young kids to get them, not necessarily the young kids, there's a lot of other people out there too. They just have their head buried in the sand and they think it's that we're crazy or we're just Debbie Downers. Or I have no idea what they think, but they're like, why are you talking politics on a real estate group? And I've seen that several times.
Yeah, I saw it as well too, and so I thought maybe we'd have a little round discussion about why it's important and how it all affects, because it's like a building blocks or a house of cards or a Jenga. You know, you pull one piece out and all of a sudden everything's not quite as stable as it was before.
Well, Michelle,
Mm-hmm.
my question is, I understand the commercial side because there's a lot of talk about some of these people may never get back to their offices just because of the situations that we're in, but I don't understand the personal credit scores, the personal credit limits. Somebody's fully employed, we've got 10% unemployment or somewhere around there, so for the most part, most of us are still making money. I don't understand the drop in the credit limit. I mean, huge credit drops. I mean, I don't understand it. Can someone explain that to me?
Well, think about credit cards. Are they secured debt or unsecured debt?
I think they're all unsecured.
They're unsecured debt. And so when you have a whole bunch of air money out there that somebody can have a shift in their life that you didn't know about as a bank or as a lender, they had a shift in their life, you didn't see it coming, maybe the pandemic affected their job or their spouse's job or something, they're trying to do preservation by turning off those open spigots of income that will then be bankruptable or have to be written off. They're doing protectionist kind of strategies, like fixing their reserves.
Okay. Well, I would think an email would be appropriate from whoever the hell. I mean, maybe their standard email just say, we noticed you're late, we noticed you missed a payment. Is there anything, just throwing a question out, I think it was Michael or somebody's credit went from $9,000 to $1,000. I mean, that's just, unless it dropped 1,000 or if it dropped to 1,000. Man, I thought, geez, that's pretty dramatic for just, I don't know, if you had this credit card for a number of years and all of a sudden you miss a payment, boy, that's running to the wall and grabbing the fire axe, it sounds like to me. So anyway, I'm just curious.
All the credit card companies lost in 2008 from very good borrowers that strategically decided to declare bankruptcy and not pay their credit card bills because they strategically let the house go to foreclosure, and the credit card companies are just protecting their own interests. It's simple business.
Because they ran up their credits. Yep. Go ahead, Robert.
And I think, Jerry, you're assuming, if you had that relationship with a relationship banker, you might get that email. But these credit card companies, you're dealing with an algorithm that says, if this happens, then this, the system send out this letter and take this action. Who's noticed that 0% promotional interest or balance transfer offers have all but disappeared? Anybody used to getting those and no longer getting them?
I had been getting them, hadn't seen any proactively for a while. However, I had a friend who wanted to borrow some money. So I actually called one of my cards and asked if they had any promotional things. And this was probably March or April. They set me up with a Bank of America. I already had a Bank of America card, a brand new card. They gave me like a $7,000 or $8,000 line of credit. No, not even the 3% initial fee on that. And then they allowed me to transfer from my other available balance this card, so that way I can keep my debt to or keep my utilization underneath a certain percentage as well. So they let me switch available credit from one card to the other. But to further expand upon what you just were talking about, Michelle, I guess paint a clearer picture. I typically run about a 3 to 5% utilization my credit cards, and I think I have between all of them about $140,000 or $150,000 available. Scare someone, but I've never in the last 2 or 3 years been above like 5% utilization. So
I think one of the more important things you just said was that was in March and April.
yeah,
That's a lifetime ago.
Mm-hmm.
true.
Very true. Joseph is posting over here on Facebook for us, and I know he's in credit. I believe he's in credit repair of some sort. And he said banks are also looking at how you're paying your other bills. One missed payment can result in your other lines being reduced or turned off completely. So they're looking for every little possible red flag trigger event, because like Kim said, people before have gone in and they've used their credit limits as a lifeline if something happened, where they can just use the credit cards and do that, or they've done something strategic and gone in and ran them all the way up and then bankrupted. And so they're trying to protect themselves and insulate themselves from this damage.
I wonder, we're talking about lines of credit, especially on credit cards, being reduced when you have low utilization. I wonder if they're doing the same things with people with 95% utilization.
I think
And what happens?
I think any little blip from your normal pattern right now gets that attention that we saw Michael got. I would expect.
What commentaries? Dale, for example, Eric had some examples of people that were having zero problems and had never, ever missed a penny. And they're reduced large amounts. I mean, $1 million here, or 30% on some of. I think that's what Eric had said in some other places. So I'm not sure it's always a blip. I think it's just flat, and it may be the health of the particular credit lender as well. Maybe they're having some kind of a blip in the background, and they have to go into protection mode to keep from tipping over their whatever their rates are that they have to keep to keep themselves off of the banks that are endangered list.
Right. Opportunity of still being able to lend.
Their lending rates.
The thing to remember is that if you're at a 5%, 7% utilization rate, and they drop your limits, they're not really cutting back on the money you're using. They're cutting back on your ability to run things up and then just declare bankruptcy, which is what happened. So I think that's a little bit different mindset than thinking they're cutting back on people who are overutilizing the resources they have. They're just keeping you from strategically doing something.
Right.
Very well, could be. Very well. Anybody else want to chime into the conversation? Everybody's being quiet.
Shut Facebook down and then go back up for some reason. But
No, Brian's still dealing with my technical difficulties, but Facebook is still watching. So. And if you're not watching, there's some commentary in the chat, but it's not on topic. It's about deals. So
we'll get to those.
Okay, so I don't have anything else on the formal presentation, but what I was going to just open the floor up was for discussion about, things that people have run into this week. I know Brian ran into some stuff with codes. I don't know if anybody, I don't want us to have to take over all of the airtime if somebody else has a comment or a question that they'd like to be discussed with the group.
Fun, sounds interesting.
What does? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Brian's Codes Fund.
Oh, Brian's Codes Fund. Okay. Well, then I'll let him do it, and maybe that'll give somebody's juices to flow and ask questions and talk about.
We're having big problems. Obviously, this year has been a great year for shrubs and trees and different things to grow up and everything. And I've had a couple of interesting code compliance. One where a neighbor is next door to one of my rental houses, and she thinks that, for one, that we're made of money. as a landlord, we get money. So, is a statement she made to the inspector. But got a fence that goes down the side of our property on the property line and everything, and the fence goes through a tree. We actually was cutting back some trees and everything, and we have another tree that is growing right up in the fence line doing the same thing, but it's a very young tree. I mean, if it continued and neglected, obviously it would do the same thing as this healthy tree that is probably 2.5 feet around. And but the pipe or the fence post, and you've probably seen them, the fence post goes right in the middle of the tree. And she's called codes and said that I need to trim the tree that is hanging over her property, that is got dead limbs on it, that is over her back porch. One has already dropped and fallen on her roof, damaged her roof, the roof on, and she cut some tree limbs off of it. But she's called codes on me, and
she put a new roof on?
Yeah, she did put a new roof on the backside, I guess. It's knocked her gutter off or whatever. The one tree limb, an act of God, knocked her gutter off. She hasn't replaced that, but I think she's replaced the roof. It sort of looks like it. She has. But anyway, the codes administrator, or should I say the codes inspector came out and was pointing it out to me. And I asked him, I said, okay, I said, I need to ask a question here. Whose tree is it?
That's what I was thinking. Tell them it's her damn tree.
So the lady comes out and she says, this is my fence. And I was like, I said, even more to the inspector, I said, it's even her fence. I said, looks like she could have cut her, way before. She's been there a lot longer than I've owned the house. And she's obviously, looked at it, and I told him, I said, if that's her fence, she neglected the fence line to clean her side of the fence line out. Yeah. In my opinion. And I said, I don't know if I've got that right or wrong. I said, but, in my opinion, I said, obviously, and I pointed to the young one that we're young, and I said, if this continued, it would do the same thing. I said, but we're going to take it out. I said, but if she would have took her side of this out and addressed the issue, it may not even be an issue today. I said, but obviously the tree's 20 years old, and my side doesn't really need to be cut, but obviously we're in the situation of figuring it out. And then he looks back on the backside, and the transformer is covered by these trees too. And I said, well, I said, what do you think? So we're in the midst of this whole discussion, and I've called the power company. Power company said if there's any trees by the transformer, we'll cut them down. If there's any trees over the service lines, whoever's tree it is will be responsible for that. So, and I said, okay. I said, if there's a tree that's on the line and it's hanging over on the other side, said, well, technically, they're looking at it the same way as I'm looking at it, is that's her responsibility. I can't have that tree cut because it's on her property, but I can cut my side and do whatever they need to do. And they said they'd be willing to take the line down on either side, but they were going to leave me a note to figure it out when they came out and looked at it. But they would not cut any more than what is around their easement. So the inspector is trying to get in the middle of this, but he, I was like, well, what did he said, I'm going to take it back to my supervisor. And I said, well, take it back. I said, let's reconvene Thursday. So we're supposed to get back together on Thursday tomorrow and talk about it. But, technically he's looking at it the same way, but she's hollering and throwing a fit and actually asked him, she's arguing with him, I need my day in court and let the judge decide whose tree that is.
Hey, fair enough. Isn't it, I don't know law, but isn't it long-standing that you are responsible if your neighbor's tree falls on your roof, it's your problem. You have the right to cut the neighbor's tree as it crosses your property line. But I've never heard of anyone being able to force the neighbor to cut their tree. So I don't know if I started to say, isn't that a long-standing law, but it's certainly tradition, is it not?
We know it's been long-standing insurance practice for the insurance companies to say, yes, it was, if the tree falls over on your house, it's your insurance. Any of my legal beagles in here want to chime in without calling names?
Not legal, but I had the same issue with the rental property years ago, and I assumed what he was saying was correct. After much discussion with many people, found out only if there was like a dead limb that they'd been notified, or they should have, mostly negligent, the tree was dead, and then it fell on your property, would it actually be the responsibility of their insurance to them? Also on your property, your street, it's like the tree has just been dead and or they've been warned or whatever. In which case,
that's an interesting concept. So if you have a dead tree hanging over your property, send your neighbor a certified letter.
Well, and I think this is the issue. The limbs that are hanging over her property are dead. And the interesting part of this whole thing is, if the tree was totally on me, yes, on me, because obviously the tree has got some problems and that I need to take care of it, and it's my responsibility because the tree is on my property. Being that your neighbor, now here's the long stand that he's told me, the neighbor has, or the other homeowner or whoever has the right to trim anything that's hanging over the property line at any given time. So that's their right. But she believes that, since she's telling the inspector that this tree belongs to me and that I need to cut it totally down. She doesn't even want it trimmed up. She's wanting it totally down. She's fighting to, have this done. And I asked her, and while the inspector was there, I said, what caused the limbs to fall off last time? I said, these limbs are up there. I said, but what caused them to fall? I said, if it's an act of God, your insurance takes care of it. The issue is she does not have insurance. She does not carry insurance. And so that's a interesting point of view, living there that long, that, not paying insurance, but she wants somebody else to take care of her issues because she doesn't have insurance. So it's that's just one of the cases, and it's very interesting to see how in fact this inspector, what I'm really more so than the conversation we're having about the tree, this inspector is young, very young, doesn't have an opinion,
Or
or
experience.
experience, and he's trying to make decisions that ultimately he's going to have to go back to his supervisor to be asked or thought about. But before he does that, he wants us as homeowners to work out the situation in a civil matter. And I said, well, the problem is that I will take care of what I need to take care of. And I said, the civil matter would be that she would take care of what she needs to take care of. And actually, when he was there, and I told him I was going to meet him there, I'd already had two guys lined up, and they had actually cut back the tree and everything. And he spent an hour there, hour and a half. We had already cut our side and cleaned up the fence line. And I said, maybe a couple more limbs up there that we're going to take. And I said, we need to get up there and get them cut. He said, well, that looks 100% better. But still, from her side, it's not 100% better because she still has...
She doesn't want the tree there at
all.
all.
She doesn't want the tree there at all. And also, at the same point, she's got a couple of limbs hanging over her property. They could fall at any time. In an act of God, she's not covered by because she has no insurance.
Well, I think you already said the key word, Brian, though. She claims that fence is hers, and if the tree is a fence, I think she just sealed her fate right there. And she's already stated that that's basically essentially her responsibility. If the fence is hers, if the tree is growing in the fence, I don't think you need a whole bunch past that to...
And what's really interesting is that the chain link fence was hers, and being that she has a problem because of the tree grew up there, she put up another wooden fence on the other side of the chain link fence, which leaves about 8 to 12 inches in between that brush has been able to grow up in between. And it's a 3-foot fence compared to a 6-foot privacy fence that is rotted, but there's brush in between the two fences growing up that's caused a whole lot of problem even from that side.
So you should sue her for leaving this mess now on your side of the yard. She needs to take away her old fence.
I'm thinking, if it's her fence and your tree, you ought to tell her to get her fence out of your tree.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. There you go. Get that pole out of my tree.
I would whack off every side of the fence and take pictures of it, and I would tell the codes inspector that I've done everything I can do. And I would file a complaint against her for her fence, and if it winds up in court, have that argument.
Yeah, she told Brian that we're rolling in money, we've got money, and he should tell his boy to get over there and take care of this tree up in her yard.
Just have your guy do it. You have help.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You got money. You got income coming in.
Yeah.
Anybody have tenants demanding that you trim your trees?
Only have one right now, and another one that said, hey, the service line that's coming in could be affected the neighbor's tree that's hanging over the service line. If we get ice or snow this year, she's afraid that she's going to lose power. Well, my thinking and my issue to that is that I'm insured,
right.
on somebody else's tree. my dad had this same issue, and at his property, and his tree in the house put a hole in the roof, took off the gutter, and fell on his property. And he calls me up. And he said, son, should we give him our insurance company? That way they can make a claim. I said, no. I said, and he said, why not? And I said, well, possession's 9/10 of the law, and he now owns 9 more tenths than you have. So he should be covered.
So,
Right, offer him a tarp.
yeah. Rick gave us a little quick legal answer. Do you want to say it, Rick? We'll be quiet and let you talk.
Sure. So it was just essentially was said by a couple people, but just confirming, yes, if a tree overhangs your yard and it's on the neighbor's property, you can trim the branches that overhang your property line. Because property interests go up into the ozone, essentially, from the line of your property. The caveat to that is you must be able to trim it without entering the neighbor's property. So if you can't access the tree without getting to their yard, you can't. But if you can do it from your yard, you can stand up on a ladder, get the chainsaw, whatever, no problem. The owner of the tree is not responsible if it falls onto a neighbor's property and damages something, unless there is some form of negligence involved. So if the tree is dying, falling over onto the property's yard, you leave it like that for 6 months, and then the tree owner could be liable. But as a general statement, if there's a strong windstorm or something like that, it's not going to be the liability of the tree owner just because it overhangs.
Awesome.
So if we get drug into court, I'll call you.
All right.
I may have to copy that right there and just give it to the codes.
Yeah, no, we'll have representation.
Yeah. But that's interesting. But I see this all the time. Even on the backside, when he walked around, the cable lines down below the power lines are covered in vines throughout her backyard, and so obviously no one's really been back there.
You need to take pictures of that.
Yeah, no one's really been back there. The power company, the cable companies are not even taking care of their own lines back there. But things to be aware of. I mean, obviously, when you look at buying or even selling these houses, taking a look at those trees is number one. Where those trees land, how healthy they are, and how much are they going to deter or cause you to, pain in the future.
Yeah, even aside from the tree falling on the neighbor's property, trees, I see trees as a huge liability.
Yep. Yep.
On a rental property. While you're on codes, last year Kansas City passed the safe harbor period for investors working on homes, and my clients haven't started any project since that happened, but I have a client, especially in Ruskin, who every time we bought a house out there, within a month you're getting code. You start working on a house, and here come the codes letters. So I was wondering if anybody had any recent experience with either that or using that safe harbor plan.
We haven't had anything. Maybe somebody else in the room.
And I guess that right now the codes have been inspectors have been pretty inactive because of the pandemic. So that may be part of the reason people.
Yeah, but they woke up about 2 weeks ago, because that's when we started getting these notices.
Right, I expected they
about
would.
a month ago.
Yeah, I actually had a property that I bought that has a big vacant house next to it. It had like 12-foot limbs, trees, everything had grown up. No one's been there for 3 years. And I'd been trying to reach this owner, and then all of a sudden, someone was at the property and they were cleaning out all the limbs and everything. My dumpster had accidentally got dumped in their driveway because that was a house that needed to be cleaned out. and I didn't worry about it because it was vacant for so long. And someone went by there, and was told that Michael's the one that authorized them to do the work. So it kind of freaked me out when someone told me that. So I ran down there, and I guess there was like a crew doing it, and something just made me stop and think, let me check code violation. Sure enough, on August 3rd, there been code violations for paint, for weeds, and for trash. This started happening from the 60s. It was when they started trimming all that stuff up, and I contacted the code violation lady and I said, did your people do this? Or did owner do this? Do you have information? Well, she really wouldn't, but she confirmed that the only place they sent violation address, which I had been trying to contact this guy at, which is Washington. So yeah, they definitely ramped stuff up starting the very beginning of August. Question about that.
Yeah. Do you have any other code stories?
No, I think, like I said, I think the other issue is, Michael, you have a good point. Anytime that you have a house that is next to another house that is vacant, if the codes administration's been called on that vacant house or sees a disruption in that in the vacant house or abandoned house or whatever you want to call it, and there's problems with your house, you're going to be penciled in too, because if you look up codes and everything, and when you look up those codes, and not only if you're looking at your property, type in on the property next door if it's vacant or something like that, you'll see exactly how many times the codes administration comes. And I would encourage anybody, if you're looking at houses in areas like that you're concerned about codes, take a look and see exactly, run the neighborhood, where if you're taking a look at a house that may have issues or had issues, I said it might be good that you look at that same area, because the way I look at this is problem areas is where your codes administration is hanging out. So if you're buying something on a street, even though you're fixing yours up, and there's like 3 or even 1 or 3 houses in the whole area that is trouble houses, your codes administrator is told not to pick on just the vacant house. They want you to write more codes. The last thing in the world is they want to go in court and say, well, you're picking on me all the time, and so a house down the street got this, that, or the other, and you're not even writing it up. So in their defense, they're looking for other issues as well.
That makes sense. However, that's kind of what scared me, because the whole driveway is one of these old houses of the driveway. It's got a wall on each side and it goes into the basement. So it was full of like refrigerators and all sorts of stuff. My driveway was the property that I had just bought, and trash. And the backyard hadn't been mowed in probably a year. It was like 3 or 4 foot tall backyard of my property. And they didn't tag my property with anything. Now, that was the next thing I checked. I'm like, shit, did they just tag that property and send it? It hadn't been cleaned up yet. So I was extremely surprised that they went after that property and didn't touch the next door. They clearly had.
I can tell you what I think triggered it. And you said kind of something that made me think this, because they are not necessarily doing it the way that Brian said and checking everybody on the block. Anybody with an out-of-state address is target 0 in their bullseye right now. They don't want any out-of-town, out of anything, getting by with vacant, abandoned, mistaken, unkempt properties. And so if they had to do a sort to see who would pick, it's anybody that's not locals going first.
That's an interesting thought, I'll buy that.
That's the first property they can get their hands on.
It's also worth noting, and it'll be interesting to see, two things come up there. The first thing to mention that I want to mention is the city, because of their budget cuts, has now cut back on maintenance of yards that are their responsibility.
Yep.
Yep.
I think that we as an industry can't or shouldn't stand them cracking down on us while they're hosting rat-infested lots next door. The second thing I want to make sure that we're all aware of is our fine mayor has, with his policies over the last couple of months, has, I believe, passed an ordinance that reduces jail time for minor ordinance offenses for failure to appear and other minor ordinance violations. And we hear that being, and I think the language is almost that vague. But we hear it being talked about in, if you get a parking ticket and you don't go to jail or you don't go to court when you're supposed to, we're not going to any longer arrest you for it or put you in jail for it. So they've removed that, that and or, up to whatever fine and or so many months of imprisonment. They're removing that for people who don't show up in court, pay their fines, but every single ordinance that we have that deals with housing providers ends with and or 6 months imprisonment. Not that we have a ton of landlords going to jail here in Kansas City, but there have been cases of that. And so we need to make sure that if they're willing to lighten those penalties for minor ordinances, or my tenant's trash in the yard and me being ticketed and threatened with jail, a minor ordinance as well.
Rick, do you think that's possible?
Sorry, Rick got a call, so I didn't catch most of that.
No, it's okay. He was saying that, the minor ordinance violations are being waived. Do you think that landlords could then use that as a defense to not being persecuted?
Yes, I mean, it's an argument that can be made. Unfortunately, a lot of that still falls within discretion, that prosecutors have that are dealing with code violations. So, it's something that can be brought up and argued, and you can always argue that it's being applied unfairly, but it's no guarantee of anything. And I do agree, too, with what you said earlier, which I caught before I jumped on the phone, about the fact they target out of state. That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think the other issue is if it's trash or something like that. Now, if it's, I don't think you're going to put you in jail for it. I mean, it'd be a strong stretch. I mean, you guys know the story where I went out to clean up code violation off of one property, and the neighbor the tenant came out and said, "Hey, you need to leave my trash alone. You're stealing my property. I'm going to call the police." And it's like, I'm there just trying to clean it up. We ended up both going to court, being that he trespassed me. I couldn't clean up the property, so sort of let me off the hook, except they went after the tenant. But these other violations of peeling paint, different things like that, you just be aware of. But still, at the same point, your tenant can say, "Hey, you can't come on my property. I don't want you painting. I don't want you doing anything. I don't want you fixing." But you may have to prove it that he doesn't want you there. And if he proves it, then going back to even the real question, if he's and you could prove that he doesn't want you there, would he be in violation or be responsible for those codes? even though he doesn't own the property, but he doesn't want you there fixing it.
Isn't that something that you can put in a lease? The owner has the right to abate any city code violations or nuisance orders or something?
I was going to say that it deals with preservation of the property, and you always have the right to, preserve your property. You just like you could enter if there's a leak. If you see a pipe running water out the side of the house, you can enter whether they give you permission or not to preserve your property. It's the same thing. Code violations are, obviously deficiency in the condition of property. So, yes, I mean, I would argue you don't even need it in the lease. Both Kansas and Missouri law provide that you can enter to preserve the property upon reasonable notice. So, in 24 hours, I'm going to enter to fix this code violation.
And then when they are a crazy tenant that still says you can't come in, then you go back to the preservation and eviction potentially for them, violating the lease by not letting you in.
I beefed up my language towing of cars. I didn't really have it vetted, but I made it clear in my lease that I can tow a car off of the property with a violation, based on notice from city and giving the owner 24-hour notice or sticking a sticker on it. When the city was revised some nuisance code last year, the city made clear that they have the right to go in and remove the vehicle. And I've always argued to the city, you have more right to tow it than I do if it's my tenant's vehicle. So get off of me and go tow the vehicle off.
So any more fun codes, stories, or questions? Or something else? We've got about 10 minutes before we wrap up.
How serious do you think the recall thing is, and what's trying to get it on a ballot coming up?
It is extremely serious. They have a lot of momentum. They have managed this very well. They've got legal advisors telling them exactly what steps to take and how to do it, to the point that they are notarizing every single page. They have a tracking mechanism for all pages. They are not letting people take them that are not tracked as who has pages for this petition. They have already I think they're close to exceeding the minimum amount they already need before verification, and right now they're in the road to getting the extra signatures needed. Then what happens is then the mayor decides from that, when they turn that in 30 days, the mayor has to decide whether he will resign or whether he will force the city council to put it to a vote.
And if the mayor resigns, isn't there a special election held then?
I'm pretty sure that's the way it works. I haven't put my head around it that much because, that group is handling it, and I'm just kind of an observer because I don't live in Kansas City. So.
And in that case, would there be an interim mayor assigned? Would that be city council that would do that?
Potential, yeah. Interesting to watch that enough is enough has started on many fronts, and we're seeing that in lots of different states. I even had someone talk about the governor of Colorado. They had a similar movement to remove the governor, and the opposition to them that wants the governor to stay went and filed the recall paperwork ahead of the group that wanted to recall the governor, and they're sitting on it. So the people who want to recall them cannot. So there's a lot of stall tactics by some very well-organized groups across the country to block the enough is enough that's coming through. It's just kind of interesting to watch. It's an interesting time. Did that answer you, Michael? Okay. Robert, did you want to say something?
No, I did you see Roman's question there?
In situation with a noise complaint in a high-rise building, what matters more, HOA rules or KCMO ordinance? Ooh, that's a legal question.
So, you want me to jump in?
Yes, please.
All right. I wouldn't say either of them matters more. The way to think about it, and this is how I always describe any kind of, whether it's a HOA or condo association, sounds like that actually would be a condo association, but is that it's kind of like layers of the onion. So you've got your federal law that trumps everything, state law that can be more restrictive but can't conflict with the federal law, local law that kind of does the same thing. It's the next layer. It can be more restrictive, and then your association ordinances can be another level. And so if there is a conflict between the two, in the sense that, the city ordinance specifically allows something that the HOA is restricting, or, a direct conflict like that, the city ordinance is what would apply. But if, for example, the city ordinance, and I'm not going to go with actual real numbers here, but said that the decibel level is 50 and the HOA is more restrictive, so it says 40, then the HOA, can do that, and that is allowed. But then kind of what makes the answer more nuanced is you said, what matters more? Well, it's different enforcement methods. So, like I said, the HOA could be, or COA could be more restrictive, but, you're not going to get a city ordinance violation or any kind of, governmental action because of that. You'd have to file like an enforcement action, or if there's fines allowed under the declaration, things like that. So I don't know that really the answer is that either of them are more important. They're different. And like I said, the HOA could be more restrictive, but it's a different enforcement mechanism than the city ordinance.
Roman says thanks. Awesome. Okay. Anything else before we wrap up today? All right. Well, hug your kids, check on your loved ones, and plan to meet with Kim on Friday morning, and us next week. Bruce, you have something?
Speaking of Kim, Jerry and I were up at the first Marion North meeting last week. First Works location up there, and it was nice. There were probably 30 folks there. There was plenty of space. Everybody could spread out, and had a speaker, local flipper, subject to. Congratulations on that, Kim.
Yeah, I'll second that, Bruce. That was a very well run meeting. They had a little bit of trouble with the sound system, but I didn't know exactly where it was, but seems like everybody else but me didn't have any trouble. So, but it's another great place to network. And Kim, thanks for, I guess, orchestrating all that.
I had nothing to do with it. Dan came to me and wanted to do it, and I said, okay, have fun.
Well, honesty isn't always the best policy. I'm taking credit for that one because that was, it came off well. And the speakers lined up, and I always cast my vote for live meetings. You guys all know that. I know that Cam, yours is exponentially larger than that, and that would take probably a gymnasium to run yours, given all the social distancing stuff. But anyway, saw a couple people. I knew certainly Bruce. There's some people I didn't know. I had a chance to meet some folks from up north. That's always a wonderful opportunity, certainly for people like me who make their living partially off of the private investment industry. And so thanks for take credit where credit's due. At least, if nothing else, they called you, and you got the ball rolling. So, again, and hopefully next month you can put an appearance in. And
well, I was gonna come last week. At 3:00, I started getting a sore throat that was getting worse and worse as the day proceeded, and I'm like, well, I have no idea where the sore throat is coming from, but if it's anything, I better stay home. But and I'm not quite comfortable bringing germs back into this house. So if I'm going to be interacting with people a little bit more closely, I not allowed to go.
Well, tell Don that, it's a silly thing to say, but please tell him to stay well. Some of us certainly miss his smiling face. That's all I can tell you. Maybe not all of us, but certainly some of us. So please pass that on. And okay. All right, kids, I'm signing off.
Okay, and then just to recap, we will go back live mid-September after school starts so that everybody knows what our target is.
Michelle, one more thing, if we could, I can just say really quick. Most of you may already know this, but the 10th of August, all of the tariff moratoriums went off of anything coming out of China. LVP went up 20 to 25%, literally the next day. We got notice on Friday. It went up at 8 o'clock the next Monday. We had a bunch of stuff in the pipeline. But I know that certainly the flooring industry was hit pretty hard with that. Maybe somebody knew it was coming. I guess we didn't. But anyway, just FYI, if you've got stuff on order, you may want to just make sure that your price hasn't changed, because there's not much anybody can do if it has. So just FYI to everybody on the Zoom this morning. That's it for me.
All right, thanks. All right, everybody, stay healthy. See you next week.